Hello friends, episode 95 of Mark talking about his stuff, and today I'm going to be talking about the Pet Shop Boys' sixth album, which was released in 1996, Bilingual, although this is the 2001 expanded CD version of the album. And it's pretty weird because I think this is where we're starting to get into what feels to me like modern history. So, for example, we were talking earlier on downstairs about vintage, and I was thinking, well, actually, what I'm wearing now, which is a Pet Shop Boys t-shirt from the 90s, doesn't feel like vintage to me. It feels like it's something that's really only just happened, and yet at the same point, it's 22 years old, and 22 years before when this t-shirt was made in 1999, 22 years before that was 1977, and 1977 feels to me like it's a million years ago, before even the punk had really started to happen. So what I'm talking about now feels very, very fresh, although it clearly absolutely isn't, because this year is the 25th anniversary of the release of Bilingual, which is their sixth album. And so I'm going to do the usual thing where I talk through all the records and I throw some quotes at you and mention a DVD or some other stuff as we go along, and really talk about what this album means to me. Now, I think this is the album that I think I probably have the most complicated relationship with in terms of Pet Shop Boys albums, for a number of reasons. The first one being at the time that it came out, which was September 1996. My world was very, very different and had moved on quite a lot since the last album that had come out 3 years previously. So when the album was released in September 1996, I was living back at my parents' house. One of my parents had died, and my partner lived in another country, and so therefore I didn't see a huge amount of them, and they didn't see a huge amount of me. And I would frequently go out Friday, Saturday nights in Birmingham. And I suspect people thought that I was either gay or single or just hopeless at relationships, because my partner never came out with me. So they made assumptions, and that's okay. That kind of ties in with some of the themes I think that are in the album. But this album didn't really connect with me when it came out. It connected later on, and it grew into more meanings as I've grown as a person. In the last time I talked about Pet Shop Boys, I didn't mention something which I should have done, which was the Pet Shop Boys' first ever remix, which was a remix of Blur's Boys and Girls, or Girls and Boys, which they did perform live in Rio on the Discovery Tour, which is on the DVD, which is up on the shelf behind me. It was also released as a single in its own right in Germany, and as B-sides in the days when you had B-sides on a CD single, in the days when you had CD singles, to the CD single of To the End. And this was effectively a Pet Shop Boys reproduction of the song, new vocals, new instrumentation, get rid of the whole of Blur, just keep Damon's vocals, maybe a little bit of the guitar. That came out on this. But it wasn't the last Pet Shop Boys remix at all, because the first Pet Shop Boys remix that I felt really felt like an original song is this, which is the Pet Shop Boys remixes of David Bowie's Hallo Spaceboy, which was released in February 1996, or thereabouts. They played it live with David Bowie, I think, at the Brit Awards in 1996, but not at any other occasion. And I'm going to pick up why I regard that song to be part of the Bilingual era shortly. Now, the recording for Bilingual started in April, I think, 1994. They went to Unique Studios, which they'd originally recorded some material with Bobby Orlando 10 years previously that turned out to be the first flop versions of West End Girls. Recorded a number of songs, including, I think, an early version of You Only Tell Me You Love Me When You're Drunk, a track called For All of Us, and one called Love Your Enemy. Those three haven't been released, but some of the other ones have been. And they also went and remixed and re-recorded Paninero, which I mentioned in the previous episode, which was during the same sessions that turned into parts of the Bilingual album. And they also re-recorded and rewrote the B-side to Opportunities in the Night, which is on this Paninero CD, and as Chris says, he added a fourth chord, because if there's one thing that Pet Shop Boys are very good at, is adding extra chords to songs that have already been written. They did it with Always on My Mind, they did it with Go West when they added the whole middle section in there. They did it with another song called Say A Vida E, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. So as far as I was concerned, Hallo Spaceboy by David Bowie is the start of the bilingual era, because it was the first track to be released in 1996, the year of the album. And the original David Bowie LP mix is, if you've heard it, is a heavy, hard, 9 Inch Nails type, pounding industrial metal thing, with lots of distorted vocals, overdriven Reeves Gabrel's guitars. It's bloody brilliant, actually. But no one would listen to it and go, do you know what? Pet Shop Boys is going to do an amazing remix of that track. But somehow David Bowie did, and they came out with Hallo Spaceboy. Here is the 12-inch of it. Somewhere over here, I better go and find it actually, is the CD single of Hallo Spaceboy, which is absolutely fantastic. But it only has one track on it, and that track being the Pet Shop Boys remix of Hallo Spaceboy. Everything else is David Bowie era material. Oh, hang on, I keep pulling out ones which aren't it. Good Lord, where's it gone? Ah, there it is. Yeah, so the commercial release of Hallo Spaceboy comes in this cover. It's got one Pet Shop Boys track on it, but it's a complete re-recording of Hallo Spaceboy, apart from David Bowie's vocals. So there's new sequencer lines, new keyboards. Neil has written a second verse that actually takes a cut up of lyrics from previous songs of David Bowie's. He then goes and does a call and response duet approach to it. Basically, if you like Pet Shop Boys and you haven't heard the remix of Hallo Spaceboy, you really need to do it. This one I'm pointing at here is a promotional 12-inch which features 4 remixes of the track on, the 4 remixes are also available on a now heavily deleted 2003 box set of David Bowie albums from the period, or on this promotional 12-inch. But the 12-inch version of it, which I think is called the Lost in Space mix, I could be wrong, is about 6.5 minutes long, and it's just a banger. Please give it a listen. I'll put a link to it down in the comments, and I regard that as being part of the bilingual album, which I'll explain reasons. There are reasons why shortly. But the first thing which really came out from the album was a frankly quite disappointing single before. Here's the 2 CD versions of it, one of which is backed with a number of B-sides, which, if I recall correctly, are The Truck Driver and His Mate, Hit and Miss, and In the Night 1995. And then on this, just loads of remixes. So there's, I think, 5 remixes of the track on this here. Before is probably my least favourite Pet Shop Boys single, because it doesn't sound like Pet Shop Boys. If you listen to it, it sounds like a different band that Neil Tennant is guest vocalist on. And the lyric, it's not the vocals, the melodies, the lyric, the choruses, none of them are particularly strong. It sounds like a pretty good album track. It doesn't sound like a number one. It doesn't sound like a great first single from the album. And lots of bands around about this point were doing weird and unusual tracks as being the first song from the album because they thought they could rely on people buying it because it's a new song. You know, The Cure put out The 13th as a single, which, whilst I've not talked about it, is most definitely the least Cure-like track I think The Cure ever released. Depeche Mode did Barrel of a Gun in 1997, which again doesn't sound like a hit single at all. New Order always put a hit out as the first song, apart from Fine Time, but Pet Shop Boys definitely made a bad choice of single here with Before. The B-sides, by the way, The Truck Driver and His Mate is great, although it does have a slightly controversial cover, and I'm not going to show you that because I don't have it. There was a promotional 12-inch of The Truck Driver and His Mate, which featured 2 penises on the cover, and the promotional versions of Before featured a picture of 1 penis on the cover. I'm not quite sure why. This is the 12-inch release of Before, which was released outside of the chart rules. I think it's 3 12 inches inside a box set. As you can probably tell, I left this one out in the sun 25 years ago, but you open the box set and you get 9 remixes of Before on 3 separate 12 inches, which are all designed to be kind of, played together. And the remixes are pretty crappy, to be honest. They are not very good, and I do not recommend them. So before, not the best Pet Shop Boys single at all. The best thing about it actually is the video, which was shot in Dungeness, which is one of my favourite places in the universe, because Dungeness is the only desert conditions in the UK, and Dungeness also doesn't look, feel or act like it's part of the UK at all. It feels like it's some weird and unusual enclave, probably about 100 miles off Reykjavik, and it's full of abandoned and unusual architecture. It's got it's got a sound mirror there, which is absolutely stunning to see. There are, I think, 3 sound mirrors in the world of those type. They're a very primitive form of early air raid warning system, which reflected the sound, so you could tell when planes were coming towards you. It's got a nuclear power station, it's got a pub, a lighthouse, a small railway, it's got some abandoned building, and it's got Derek Jarman's cottage. It's an incredible place to be, but it's like nowhere else in the whole of the world, and it's my secret, so please don't go and live there. The second kind of song that was released from the album, this came out in August 1996, is A Vida E. That's the way life is, and this is a song that's still played live to this day by the band. It's a huge hit and an anthem, sometimes played in an acoustic fashion, sometimes not, and it really rides on the whole kind of Latin American rhythms and the Spanish rhythms and the use of other languages that became very, very important to this album. And so the band were hugely influenced by the Discovery Tour, where they went to South America for the first time, bought lots of CDs, listened to lots of music, picked up on the use of phraseology, chords, rhythms, all that type of stuff, to make stuff that sounded like Pet Shop Boys but wasn't Pet Shop Boys actually, and it was a pretty unusual step. And there's 2 CD singles for A Vida E. There's this one, which is backed with Betrayed and How I Learned to Hate Rock and Roll, and a remix. And this one, which has 4 remixes on. And you don't look at that and go, that's a Pet Shop Boys CD at all. There's nothing about it that tells you that you're actually looking at a Pet Shop Boys release. And I think A Vida E, the whole thing about this album, Bilingual, this period, is that it's almost a period of confusion and consolidation. So the things that you previously will have associated with Pet Shop Boys weren't really the case for this album at all. So you think about, well, there's a kind of arch Britishness, there's a kind of like a use of traditional chords, there's a grandiose use of disco, all that stuff not really here at all. This is the vinyl edition of Bilingual, the 2017 remaster. I don't have an original 1996 edition of Bilingual because I was living in a small room at the time and I just didn't have the space to buy records. So I bought CDs instead. This is probably, as I've said, the album that I have the most complicated relationship with. It's also probably not my least favourite, but amongst my least of the Pet Shop Boys original studio albums. Because it didn't hit me the way that I was expecting it to hit me at the time. As I said before, the band had taken on this new air of kind of Spanish and Latin infused rhythms, and it just really wasn't where I was at all. So I'll give you an idea, September 1996, I think that was the month that Suede released Coming Up. It was the summer of Britpop. Oasis had just come out of Nebworth. Blur were absolutely enormous. Pulp had just got on the back of the Different Class era. Supergrass were rising up. I was up to my neck in indie schmindy and guitar music made by disaffected white boys, and so disco type stuff with a Latin feel was not where I was at all, and it wasn't actually where I listened to it and I just have this sense of crushing disappointment with the Bilingual album, because my music taste had gone in one direction. I think it gone a completely different direction. And I've never liked the Latin American music at all. It just doesn't push my buttons, even when it's really, really good, and I can tell it's really, really good, and I'm going, no, it just doesn't work for me at all. And this album, I really had to work to make sense of it, and I really had to change the track listing around and the sequencing, which is, by the way, is something that Neil Tennant agrees with when they were putting together the reissue of the album in 2001, and then later 2017, Chris and Neil had discussions around changing the running order. And Neil's view, which I agree with, by the way, was that Metamorphosis and Electricity, tracks 3 and 4 on the album, could benefit from either being remixed or removed from the album. And I think that's exactly right. So the running order I have for it is very similar to the running order for the album, but I replaced track 3, Metamorphosis, with the extended 12-inch mix of Hello Spaceboy, which is here, and then following that up with the track Red Letter Day, which is the opening song on side 2. I'll put the track listing down in the comments below. But I listened to it and it's just like, this is not what I was hoping for it to be. But as I've grown older and stuff, it's become better for me, this album. It really, really has. So it opens with the track Discoteca, and Discoteca is a very not problematic but unusual Pet Shop Boys song, because they re-recorded it, they remixed it, they tried really, really hard to make it into a single, and that didn't quite work. But it opens up with the idea of, I don't speak the language, I don't understand a word, where angels fear to tread, I've sometimes walked and tried to talk, that how can I be heard in such a world when I am lost? I'm doing what I can to see me through. I'm going out and carrying on as normal, which is almost like a sequel to the previous kind of like HIV and AIDS related songs which we had in It Couldn't Happen Here, oh God, I've forgotten the name of it now, but it's on Behaviour as well. It's the same kind of thing. It's about going out and carrying on as normal, and many years later, when I experienced quite a tragedy in my personal life, this song, I was like, I'm going out and I'm carrying on as normal, and I'm going to go and meet people. And Discoteca and the following song on the album, Single, are interconnected through sharing the same basic rhythm, which is by a bunch of drummers called Shaboom from I think Scotland, and then they also use Shaboom for I think a track, A Red Letter Day, as well as additional percussion, and it flows the songs into each other. So for example, Discoteca has a song. Discoteca is a song around going out, carrying on as normal, looking for a disco, going, and then on the single release there's an additional vocal where Katie Kassoon sings "One Day We'll Be Free," and that's the concept of, well, one day we will be free. That's an anthemic idea, which also ties into, I think there's a song by Rosilla, I think, called "Everybody's Free to Wear Sunscreen" or something. I don't know. I didn't really pay a huge amount of attention to the 90s in that one. And then the second track on it is Single, which is about effectively a traveling businessman, but also about what happens if you're unable to have a fulfilling relationship, and what you do about that. So there's a single on Single that the lyric is very much around meeting people, being alone, traveling a lot. What do you do? I'm single bilingual, and the use of single stroke bilingual also ties into the unambiguous sexuality that Neil Tennant was now open about, where previously he hadn't been, is he was bilingual. And I think the idea of calling it bilingual, great name for the LP, because it ties into the concept of fluid sexualities, fluid identities, the idea that you're not just British, but you're actually a citizen of Europe and a citizen of the world. It's a very cosmopolitan way of looking at the world, and I wasn't perhaps, I didn't grasp that for quite some time until after it came out. So it's a great song, Single Bilingual, and Discoteca, absolutely brilliant Pet Shop Boys song. I was like, this is going to be a brilliant album. Oh no. No. Metamorphosis is next, which Neil has said has the worst lyrics he's ever written. There are certainly the least convincing delivery that he's ever had, where he kind of like sings a justification for the way that he lives his life. Please allow me to try to explain. I'm living proof that a man can change. I knew what I wanted. I knew how to get it. Didn't make me happy, so I started again. But it's done in that kind of, West End Girls type speak, but it didn't work with the backing, because that kind of spoken word delivery works very, very well in West End girls because it's a kind of pulsing, somewhat threatening, someone whispering in your ear some veiled threats. Metamorphosis is a full-on disco banger. With squealing girl vocals and all the belchy, bleepy bass sounds and the big pumping horns. So it doesn't quite work. When you listen to the LP mix of Metamorphosis, it sounds like you're playing a 33 at 45, and you go, just slow down, man, slow down. And I think sometimes a lot of bands cover perhaps weaknesses in their songwriting by making the song very fast so that you don't have time to catch on to the substance of it because there's no substance inside the song and the song is passing you by so quickly. You haven't got time to go, stop, no, that lyric doesn't make sense. Kind of like an action movie where you suddenly go, especially, for example, if you've seen The Last Jedi. There's a scene where a lightsaber disappears in The Last Jedi because there's no way that one of the red cloak characters in Snoke's throne room wouldn't then use that second lightsaber to kill Rey. But if they just make it disappear with CGI, you never think of it. You don't even notice that it's disappeared. It's the same kind of thing with Metamorphosis, which is Neil's least favourite Pet Shop Boys track, and I think that there's mileage to be had in that. It even includes the most terrible look. The most important thing is not to end up bitter, because when you start to feel increasingly forlorn, warmth, love comes right around the corner. And I'm like, that's not a very good lyric, which Neil agrees with. And then the next song on it is Electricity, which again is a spoken word track from the perspective of a drag queen that does live lip sync. Not a great song, shouldn't be on the album. Certainly, so it shouldn't be songs 3 and 4 on the album, because you're expecting songs 3 and 4 to be. These are the singles. These are the big hitters. You had a couple of ones where you've eased your way in. Songs 3 and 4, big hitters, big singles. Or you're going to take the mood down a little. Doesn't work. Okay. So when I listen to the album, song 3 is Hallo Spaceboy, where Neil sings "Do you want to be free?" and Bowie sings back, "Yes, I want to be free," and you've got that kind of, which ties in with the vocal that's in Discoteca as well, when they sing "One Day We'll Be Free." And then the fourth song, which I have on my sequence of the album, is A Red Letter Day, which is a 100% stone dead, I will arm wrestle you to death if you disagree with me, Pet Shop Boys classic. Now I'm jumping ahead a little in the sequence, but A Red Letter Day has a lyric about go to work and take your calls and watch the fruits of your labour on the walls, and it's around working for a living, which ties in with the themes that are in Single-Bilingual. It's around freedom. It's around hoping for a glorious occasion, whatever that is. And A Red Letter Day is a phrase that was used to describe when you got normally an official invitation or an event of some significance, such as a wedding. That was a red letter day, when you were sent a red letter and it said, you are hereby, we request your pleasure of your company to attend this amazing event, whatever it is. And so A Red Letter Day, really, to me, sits as part of a 4-piece song suite of Discoteca single, Hallo Spaceboy, and A Red Letter Day, and it shouldn't be track 7, it should be track 4. But also, if you watch the video for A Red Letter Day, there is a political slant to that, because the video was shot not long after the announcement of the 1997 general election, and the idea was that it was the video is a parody of the 1979 Conservative Party political adverts which said Labour isn't working, long queues of people, and the idea being a red letter day is that in the video everyone was queuing to make a telephone call, but also queuing underneath billboards which mocked the 1979 Conservative Party political manifesto. And so therefore the song was actually about people queuing for the democratic right to have their red letter day. The Labour Party, which won the 1997 election, has traditionally been seen as or associated with the colour red, and the lyric about watching the fruits of your labour is very much something which ties in with the core parts of the Labour Party. So it's probably quite a political song, maybe not as political as I'm with Stupid, but that is for 10 years in the future when I talk through that. Song 5 is Say A Vida E, which I've mentioned before, and that's built upon a track, the name of which I can't remember. However, if you look very carefully at the inner sleeve, it will tell you that the music is it's written by some people that aren't Pet Shop Boys. So Neil had a Spanish partner, at the time that the album was being recorded. And he bought some CDs on the Discovery Tour in Latin America, listened to one of them and went, that sounds really good, and I want to turn that into a Pet Shop Boys song in the way that they adapted Go West, Always on My Mind, other cover versions, It's Alright, for example. I say A Vida E is one where they perhaps went further than any other cover version and turned so much of the song into their own work that it effectively became a co-write between two sets of musicians that had never met. And Neil also thinks that following up Say A Vida E with It Always Comes as a Surprise is a great move. Now, It Always Comes as a Surprise is the last track on side one, although in these days most people were listening to them on shiny CDs and special frosted covers. Because that's what you did. So the idea of a side one and a side two just didn't really exist. And the idea that maybe having 12 songs on an album meant that the vinyl was cut pretty close and quiet, didn't really think about that. Vinyl was not the dominant format. But I think It Always Comes as a Surprise is just lovely, almost like a pause, a breath, a palate cleanser, a moment where, you're in the middle of having like the best meal of your life, but you stop. You have a little sip of wine, pretend this is white wine, drinking on the job, terrible, don't tell anybody. And you kind of carry on with a fresh appreciation. And then it flips over to side two, and side two opens with A Red Letter Day, which I've talked about a couple of minutes ago. It's absolute Pet Shop Boys classic, by the way. Just an absolutely brilliant track. And I've suddenly remembered I've left the CD single for A Red Letter Day in another room, which means I'm going to come back in a moment and talk about it. Hang on. And I'm back in the room. That phrase has some terrible connotations thanks to British television. So Bilingual then, as an album, deep into side two, A Red Letter Day, open side two with a sample section from a CD of a choir, which is then played to sound like a Moscow voice choir. And Chris Lowe said at one point, whenever Neil runs out of things to talk about, he always goes back to Russian history, which explains my October Symphony and a number of the other songs which are on the album. Song 8, by the way, on Bilingual is called Up Against It. Up Against It takes its title from a play that was written by Joe Orton in 1966, just before he was murdered. And Up Against It was a proposal, kind of like almost a play stroke screenplay, to kind of be a sequel to Beatles' Hard Day's Night. But the Beatles decided not to go for it in the end. But it's clearly, intentional and designed to be intentional to have a lyric which reflects on about working and being up against it, existing inside a very heterosexual society and having to exist inside that when perhaps you don't fit into the box. And there's a number of songs around this album, which are around not necessarily fitting into the boxes that people want to put you in. Metamorphosis, for its failings as a song, addresses that quite clearly around where Neil sings when nature had alternative plans. And it was really, really difficult for me to be in the world in 1996, although I had a stable and brilliant loving relationship with somebody. As I've mentioned before, people didn't know who that partner was because they lived in another country. I didn't see them very often. They had made assumptions about who I was. My dad had made assumptions about things. When there were 4 people in the room and my dad wanted to show off, he would tell a joke where he said, well, they say 1 in 4 is gay, and it's not me, and it's not him, and it's not him, so it must be you. And if I was in the room, it was always me that he pointed to. And when you've got your parents making jokes about you being gay, then you're not exactly going to be inclined to go, hey, Dad, what if I am? Because you know damn well that's not going to go down particularly well, or at least on the basis of everything that he's presented out there. I didn't get the feeling I was going to be accepted with open arms as one of the family. It'd be more like, oh, that's a disappointment, or something more. And I went to an all-boys school. My brother went to an all-boys school. My dad asked if we were gay, and I was like, dude, have you seen the magazines in the house that we read a lot? There's no willies in them. That's what I was thinking. And I was just like, God, how fucking oblivious is that? you know. And also, if I had been, or if I was, or I was kind of like between the, or I was like, inside both camps at the same time, whatever it was, I certainly wasn't going to tell him, And as I've kind of alluded to before, everyone goes through a period of exploring and experimenting, and sometimes you find the thing that works for you very easily and straight away, and you go, "That's what I'm for." And for me, it took me a while to find out who I was, and I know that if I had been um, a certain way, my dad would not have been supportive in any way. I would have been the butt of the jokes. Because now he would have been able to say, not just point at me and say, so it must be you. He said, I know it's you. And when you find yourself in a position where you can't be honest about who you are because of the prejudices that exist in the society that's built around you, that's not somewhere you're going to be comfortable in, is it? And that's their failing, not my failing. Their failing. I know that. We are who we are, and we have to own that and be honest about that, and we have to accept it. And I was who I was, and I never tried to be anybody other than who I was. I just had to be discreet about who I was in the shape of, unjustified and ignorant phobias by people that had a very narrow drainpipe view of the world. Uh, you know, um, and as I've found myself, if you put yourself into a pigeonhole, you end up covered in pigeon shit. Whereas I'm a little bit more, well, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. I don't even know what I was going to say. The next song after Up Against It is The Survivors, which the band have played very, very rarely live. I think they played it 2 or 3 times. They played it in 2017 at the Royal Albert Hall when they did a show with an orchestra. I was there, so I feel very, very privileged to have seen it. But The Survivors is a song about surviving. Whatever the trials and tribulations that you've been through, you've survived them. This is a continuation of the themes that were picked up in It Couldn't Happen Here, in King's Cross, in Being Boring, I think probably It Always Comes as a Surprise, or Metamorphosis. It's the same kind of things. You've been through a traumatic event and you've survived. And The Survivors is, at memorials for other faces in the crowd, teachers and artists, and Saturday girls in suits or sequins. Sequins. If life is worth living, it's got to be run as a means of giving, not as a race to be won. Somehow we'll survive. That's a pivotal lyric, because it's around surviving almost a terrible set of circumstances. Track 10 before, no single, should be track 4 on side 2 of an album, unless it's not particularly good. I can't think of a single album where the best song on it is buried in the middle of side 2, unless it's a double album, and there shouldn't be that many double albums in the world. Track 11 is To Step Aside. And then finally, Saturday Night Forever, which at one point, by the way, Saturday Night Forever was potentially kind of ironed out as potentially being a single. It was remixed by an artist called Love to Infinity and released as a promotional CD. It's very, very rare, very hard to get hold of. I haven't got it, but I do have a copy of the remix. And it's, I don't think it's been played live. If it has, it's not very often. But it kind of follows the same kind of almost celebratory, euphoric kind of reward and payoff that you get in Go West. Was it worth it? It's all right. You've come to the end of the album, and here's your moment where you're suddenly, dancing in the disco in the spotlight. So it's a really, really good album, but it came out at the wrong time. It hit the wrong way, and people just didn't take to bilingual at all. It was a Latin American album at the time when Britpop and guitars were the flavour of the month, and everybody loved that. It was an album that was full of rhythms that people were not interested in, and it was an international album at the time that British culture had zeroed in on itself in a very myopic, insular fashion. The band also didn't tour the album when it came out. They played a couple of TV show appearances, but the singles didn't sell particularly well. And there were a lot of singles that were released from the album, by the way. I've barely touched upon those, so I'm going to have to race through these. This is the American 12-inch of Say A Vida E and Two Step Aside, which features a number of remixes of Say A Vida E and a number of remixes of To Step Aside as well, which were later used as B-sides to various CD singles. This is a double 12-inch, by the way. It's about 80 minutes long. Which is pretty damn bizarre. So I kind of thought, well, do I need to get the second 12-inch of Say A Vida E? And in the end, I kind of looked at it and went, no, actually, I'm just going to get the remixes. But the band were looking internationally at various things. I should also point out that there was a third single from the album, which is effectively called Single and Bilingual. And actually, it's kind of like every version of it has kind of like this. There's a weird, lovely textured, transparent, frosted kind of sleeve, which on one hand says bilingual and on the other hand says single. And then there's a CD and a sticker, which kind of indicates which one it is. And some of the formats, by the way, of single don't actually have single on them. But there's the yellow version of it, which again you look at and you go, these are absolutely, as I mentioned before, Pet Shop Boys very, very good at design and very, very good at kind of presenting an international, cosmopolitan feel of owning a quality product. There were two 12-inches that were released as promos, by the way. This is the one for Discoteca and Single-Bilingual. The reason it was called Single-Bilingual on the single was because Everything But the Girl had just done a single called Single. So it was retitled as Single-Bilingual, and it was remixed and slightly re-recorded. And Discoteca was also remixed and re-recorded, and they had a number of stabs at it. Here's a promo 12-inch, which says, "Is there a disco near here?" And here's the second promo 12-inch, which has the Spanish version, "Hey, una discoteca por aquí," which, of course, if you go on holiday to Spain, and Spanish holidays were big then, that was a thing. So this is backed with the PSB extended mix and a remix by the Trouser Enthusiasts. I have a 12-inch of it with a very, very battered sleeve, and I also have the standard kind of promo 12-inch of it. The fourth single off the album is A Red Letter Day, and this is the CD that I've forgotten to point out earlier. Comes in, if you look in there, an embossed sleeve, two 12-inches, two CDs with stickers on and different track listings. So CD one of this is backed with The Boy Who Couldn't Keep His Clothes On and Delusions of Grandeur, which also comes in a Moscow mix. The Red Letter Day Moscow mix, the extended 12-inch version. And the second CD features a bunch of remixes, including a Pet Shop Boys extended edit. Those remixes, some of them aren't particularly good. But what I will say is that there's a remix by Motive 8, who also remixed, by the way, Pulp's Common People in Disco 2000, which came out on this promotional 12-inch here. And the Motive 8 mix has this brand new and wonderfully squelchy extra synth line on there, which really makes the track into a classic. There's a 12-inch version of it is only on the promo 12-inch, and The Boy Who Couldn't Keep His Clothes On, which was one of the B-sides, is only available on vinyl as a remix, I think. There's also a 12-inch version of A Red Letter Day, which came in a sealed, stickered sleeve, and it is effectively, I think this has got what this thing. It's got a Basement Jaxx dub, the Congo Dongo Dubstrumental, whatever the hell that is, and a dub mix of The Boy Who Couldn't Keep His Clothes On. So if you liked instrumentals, this 12-inch was right up your street, and if you didn't, it was a complete waste of money. Of course, I prefer them with vocals on. But A Red Letter Day is just an absolutely classic Pet Shop Boys song, which doesn't get played live enough, doesn't get enough attention, didn't sell enough copies when it came out. Such a shame, but I think it was the wrong album. The whole thing about Bilingual, it was the wrong album at the wrong time. Now, aware that they weren't perhaps doing fantastically well, the band announced a residency at the Savoy Theatre in June 1997, and they also promoted it with a single called Somewhere. Here is a double 12-inch promo of Somewhere, which has lots and lots of remixes of Somewhere and Two Step Aside on. And they also released this version of Bilingual, which is a double CD, which features Bilingual remix. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to quickly point out that the CD had a frosted case here, so it was really, really difficult to get a frosted case on there. Now, the standard CD also has that frosted case on there, but with Bilingual, The whole point, very similar by the way to Very, was to create a kind of like a frosted case with a different cover, so you knew you were looking at something that wasn't a standard CD on the racks. And this double CD is pretty nice. I don't know why I haven't got the original CD. Probably because I bought the double CD and I needed the money, and I sold the other one to my brother. Hello. Um, Somewhere was also released as 2 CDs here. Again, these are quite unusual CD single designs because the case is really small. The paper just sits along here inside, the curve of the J card, and the CDs themselves were. So what you're looking at really is unusual and innovative designs for the CDs to make them stand out. It's not just a regular CD single with a picture of some moody-looking millionaires on the background. And this was backed with a couple of extra tracks, one called Disco Potential, one called A View from Your Balcony, a cover version of Leonard Bernstein's, I think, was it Leonard Bernstein? Anyway, it was, I think it's Somewhere from West Side Story, and remixes of Somewhere and Two Step Aside that hadn't been released in the UK but had been on the promotional tour, which I'd shown you earlier on. And to kind of tie in with the Savoy show, they also sold a limited edition double CD at the merch stall for £10. Which is taken from 2 1-hour radio broadcasts on BBC Radio 1 that the band put together of a documentary of their life and career. And About is a really interesting, fascinating little release. This CD comes in a trifold package here with the CD1, CD2. It's about an hour long. You get little snippets of demos, frustrating little glimpses of what might have and could have been, including, the first ever releases of a demo of Closer to Heaven, Bada Boom, Oh Dear, I Need You, and demo versions of Rent, Later Tonight, In the Club or In the Queue, a song called Fat Northern Bastards, which was written for Anton Deck, and also some Radio 1 jingle from when they did the Radio 1 show in 1991. And a version of Go West called 1-0 to the Arsenal. Anyway, it's good if you can get it. It's about 30 quid, I think, on Discogs if you want to try and find the copy now. But I have to warn you, those demos are not full versions of the songs. They're 10, 20, 30 seconds long at most. But they're worth having. But this was sold at the merch stall at the Savoy. Now, I didn't see the Savoy shows. I didn't live in London at that point. The closest I came to experiencing the Savoy shows was this DVD, the first Pet Shop Boys DVD to be issued, Somewhere Live in Concert. And if I open up the inside, it comes with an Eagle Vision DVD catalogue there, and some postcards which were sent to my home address promoting the latest releases. Because I was on the mailing list. If I remember correctly, this comes from 3 Alveston Place, Leamington Spa, which is now demolished, but that is where the mailing list for all the bands were. And I got the idea that 3 Alveston Place was where all the bands lived together in some kind of big mansion like the Beatles movie, and Erasure and Oasis and New Order and Pet Shop Boys and Depeche Mode and probably Tapao all kind of lived together in the same place, and they all shared each other's milkman and postman and deliveries and that type of thing. And maybe if somebody couldn't deliver to the Erasure's house, they'd drop in to see the Pet Shop Boys and go, I've got this package for Erasure, and Pet Shop Boys would be like, new synthesizer, nice, we'll have that. But no, it never came, mate. Who knows? But no, Somewhere was released as a DVD in the late 90s. It's a very basic, very straightforward DVD. The menu is a pain in the arse to navigate. And it's an hour of a live show and a 25-minute documentary. The band also became toured in a more conventional fashion. They put together a festival show, which was all greatest hits, based broadly upon the Somewhere show as well, but with some extra songs. So some of the B-sides were swapped out. And for example, they put in, I don't know, I wouldn't normally do this kind of thing, or some of the other hits like Suburbia, which perhaps maybe they weren't playing on these shows. But no, Somewhere is available on YouTube, considerably cheaper than the now out of print and deleted DVD. But I didn't see this show because we only played 20 shows in London, and I didn't live in London, and that means that again the Pet Shop Boys haven't played the UK in a touring capacity for 6 years by the time they played the Savoy. And in fact, it was 8 years, which was more than half of their career by the time that they got round to actually touring the UK properly for a second time. So of course that was when I saw them. I'm going to wrap up pretty soon. 2001 saw the release of a extended double CD version remaster of Bilingual. This has all the B-sides on. It has an unreleased version of Discoteca on, and an alternate mix of Red Letter Day. But it's not, if you're going to buy one version of the album, this is the one to get. But ultimately, you pay your money, you take your choice. The status quo had it. Bilingual was a really, really difficult album. Because it came out at the wrong time. It was the wrong record for the wrong time. It wasn't inward looking. It wasn't very British. It was more Latin and international. Some of the songs were not designed to please necessarily British people, but designed to please international fans, and took on a lot of influences that were not exclusively English. And of course, it came out in the midst of Britpop, in the midst of Pulp and Suede and Blur and Oasis and Supergrass and all those other bands, and to an extent it felt like the band were aiming somewhere, but they were aiming in the wrong place. So whilst the album itself is very, very good, it wasn't the right album at the right time for the UK. And it felt to me that it was the first time that perhaps the band had stumbled from a commercial position. It sold less copies, it was less successful, it had a lower profile. It was the first time that the band kind of slipped down a little bit. So, there was no guarantee that they would go into arenas, and the best way to avoid that is to go and play 20 shows in a theatre, as opposed to playing arenas and not selling them out. Over time, I've grown to love the album. It's got much, much better over time. And I enjoy it a lot more now than I did when it came out. But hindsight is ideal for these type of things. That's where I'm going to end up here. So that brings us to the close of the Bilingual era and period. Next time I talk about Pet Shop Boys, I'm going to be talking about the Nightlife album. But in the meantime, I have plenty of other things which I'm going to be nattering on about. So I'm going to end up here. Be lovely in the comments. Stay beautiful. I will see you all again sometime soon, hopefully. But in the meantime, this is not. Why am I trying to come up with some kind of catchy ending? I haven't got a catchy ending. I'm just going to stop. Thank you for watching me